But let's talk about Jonathan. So Jonathan is no stranger to PD Talks. In fact, I think this is his fourth PD Talk. And let me just tell you a little bit about him. So Professor Jonathan Acuña Solano is an enthusiast of virtual language learning and teaching. He's the head of curriculum design at Centro Cultural Costarricense Norteamericano, and he's a senior ELT professor at Universidad Latina de Costa Rica, both in its pre and postgraduate programs. So for more than 8 years, Professor Acuña has been teaching English online, both in synchronous and asynchronous content and language courses. And he's also worked on the design and implementation of fully online language courses, and he's adapted content from ELT courses to a virtual environment. He holds a master's degree in education with an emphasis in English language teaching and an associate's degree in teaching and learning in higher education, and also another degree in online, hybrid, and blended education by Laureate International Universities. So here to speak with us today with the presentation, Best Assessment Practices for Online Teaching, please welcome Jonathan Acuña with a warm virtual round of applause. So show your hands there.
Thank you, everyone. Before we begin, I'm going to be asking you to make sure that you can open the following link right there in the chat box. And I would like you to please very quickly go into the form and complete it in about a minute. It's not going to take that very long. I just need to get some what I call demographics in order for me to, if it is necessary, refocus my presentation. Okay, I'm just collecting this information in order for us to get to know a little bit about who's attending our webinars. And at the same time, to also, again, as I said, if I need to refocus my presentation, I will try to do it based on the information that I'm getting right now. Okay. Well, I can see that the second most important group of participants are coming from Mexico. So welcome you all. And the third one is coming from Nicaragua and then Brazil. Yeah, welcome to. That's nice. Okay, people. I'll be referring to the answers to the questions in a few minutes, but in the meantime, let me go and start sharing my second screen. So if you get to see me looking at this direction, it is because my second screen is over there. Okay, so you should be able now to see my, well, it is a blank slide. Am I right?
Yep, we see it.
Okay, excellent. Well, people, welcome again. And the idea about this session is to discuss a little bit about assessment practices for online teaching. If you ask me why is it that I want to talk a little bit about this, it is because I can understand that because of what is happening right now, you know, worldwide, we need to understand that there's things that we need to start doing differently, whether you are a certified or a non-certified instructor, whether you are teaching remotely because this is what the new normal is telling you that you have to, or because your local authorities have decided that this is the way to go about it. But my idea here is not just like to consider that these are like best assessment practices for online teaching, but even when we go back into our face-to-face teaching, we will be able to use the same information to work a little bit about on that. My idea today is to cover 4 different areas, and in the 4 different areas, I want to work with you in different breakout room mini sessions where you will be able to discuss with your partners. I want to start by considering the importance of devising an assessment plan. Why? And this is something that I have been like insisting a lot, especially with my students at the university. Why? the Bloom's taxonomy is an important tool that should be used? Why is it that we need to focus on core content when we are assessing formatively or summatively? And obviously the success that is needed when we're talking about assessment, but we're talking about student success. So those are like the 4 different areas that I'm going to be addressing, and that all of us are going to be working in smaller groups when the time comes. So let us begin. Let us begin by talking a little bit about designing assessment plans for online language courses. And I have here a very simple, way of thinking in terms of what does it mean when we're talking about the design of an assessment plan for online courses. And I have 3 different questions that I would like you to discuss with your partners. And this is going to be our first breakout session. I'm going to stop here for a moment. I'm going to stop sharing, and I'm going to be sharing with you actually the link to this slide that I would like you to please open it and make sure that you're able to open it now so I can have you work with, some of your partners. So there are 150 people, roughly speaking, Mark. So should we go for, I don't know, how many breakout rooms?
Well, let's see what number looks best for us. So I think, what if we go for about 5 or 6 people per room, just in case there's
That's
anybody who doesn't feel like participating. So we'll have 30 breakout rooms.
Okay, I'm working on that. Thank you for the mathematics.
No, I've already got it ready to go.
Oh, sorry. Excellent,
yeah.
excellent. Okay, so if you have this already open, please make sure that you have it. And now you're going to be sent to a breakout room. So let's go for it, Mark. Thank you.
Sure. No, and right before I open, if you get stuck or you're not sure what you have to do, there's a button that says call for help, and we'll try to join you and help you out.
Well, once again, the questions were just for us to start thinking a little bit about what does it mean? What it really means, when we're talking about designing assessment. Well, let me share some simple thoughts in regards to this. So let us consider the first question again. What does an assessment plan for online language course look like? And remember, this is something that probably could also be used when you are teaching face-to-face. Well, the fact is that it might look like something like this. It's basically like a breakdown of the different things that you're going to be doing in terms of what you want to do formatively and obviously summatively. That is, for example, there might be an in-class production task series of exercises. That might be one thing too. That could be merely formative because that's what you're doing every time that you have been teaching, say, one simple specific content from the textbook. There might be mock quizzes or tests just because you want to know how much students are assimilating. There might be automated quizzes and exams. They could range from 10 to 20%. It all depends on how this is actually agreed in the school you work for. The same with oral examinations. There might be also discussion forums if you would like to, working on wikis, blogs. Again, the thing is, like, what is it that you could be doing with the students in order to help them work on their language development and consolidate it? So this is more or less what it would look like. Nothing that you have never seen before. Perhaps the only thing that you are not necessarily contemplating or that you didn't used to contemplate before is that we should also be including a little bit about the formative assessment tasks that we envision could be covered throughout the course. Because the idea here is like, let's have a little bit of variety. So again, if we have one in-class production task at the beginning, there might be another one towards the end, but is it going to be the same kind of a structure, the one that we're going to be using for both of them? That's for you to think a little bit about. In terms of assessment experiences, we're talking about like anything in which we will be able to notice whether students are or are not yet grasping the content that we want them to assimilate. So that's why there might be like this independent tasks for the 4 skills, which are obviously aligned to the course and the lesson plan objectives. But there might also be a little bit of a student self-awareness and non-graded examinations. Any kind of quizzes that could be, say, for example, created through Google Forms that can give the students a real, like no time mark for whatever they have been doing. It's a good way for them to say, okay, I have assimilated things, or I'm still wondering how this is, let's say, constructed, so to say, or how the structure works, or and so on. And this is also going to be something that will back you up in terms of getting a statistical analysis for what's simply happening in the classroom in terms of the simulation of content. For sure, we're going to be having graded automated tests. If that's what we have right now, the oral production tasks are there to strengthen student speaking, hopefully via these situational tasks with roles, suggested content to be developed, conversation strategies, expected language, and obviously the time that students are supposed to be allotted to carry out the activity. Same would happen with production tasks to strengthen student writing, such as guided writing exercises. What about listening and reading? It's pretty much like the very same thing. So again, here I'm just giving you like some examples of assessment experiences that could be either used as summative or formative, or I should go the other way around. Formatively first and then summatively, because then we will be doing something similar to what the students are actually experiencing in the classroom. Now, talking about the guidelines. What are you expected? So what are some of the guidelines per task that should be provided to students? In the self-examinations, for instance, we should be thinking of what needs to be done and what needs to be used in order to create this digital diagnostic data collector that will tell me, the teacher, and the students where they are in terms of their development. And especially when we have these automated quizzes and tests. But these graded automated tests that I'm talking about are there also to be used. I don't know if this is going to, depending on your school, if this is going to be happening while you are teaching the class, out of the class time. But anyway, this is something that probably is going to be happening either as a group, when you collectively have all them together, or individually, because everybody is working from home. We also need to tell them that these oral production tasks that we have envisioned in our assessment plan are there for them to practice what is being obviously covered in class. Some of them might be also assigned for homework, but in the end, they should resemble what is going to be used in in-class oral activities. And finally, just like a simple last remark over here is like any other production tasks are there to help you monitor student advancement in terms of formative and summative assessment scenarios. So you see, that's basically what I wanted you to start thinking of. So there are some important things for us to keep in mind over here. So let me recap. Let's wrap up this section over here. There is a plan, and the plan, okay, is there because no language course can begin with no assessment plan. So you cannot begin a course and say, okay, what am I supposed to be doing in week number 3, in week number 5? This is something that needs to be in your agendas already. Second, the lesson plan. The lesson plan cannot be created if such a assessment plan has not been devised first, because you teachers, your lesson plans need to be connected to the course syllabus, which is obviously aligned, as I was mentioning before, to that assessment plan, not the other way around, correct? once again, we should have a variety of tasks. No assessment plan can only include one type of formative or summative assessment tasks. We should have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, as many as possible in order not to, let's say, produce any kind of boredom among of our students. We don't want the students to say, like, what a bore, it's always the same kind of assessment. And of course, we need to consider the reasons behind all these things. It's a good idea to explain and to guide our students so that they can comprehend that the activities that they are carrying out are geared towards helping them develop themselves, especially when it comes to the summative assessment. Of course, we're not necessarily teaching just because there is a summative assessment at the end of a cycle, but because we want to make sure that they're able to produce the core language that is going to be learned and practiced by them in the classroom. Okay, so this is where we are. Again, our assessment plan at least should include 4 or more types of assessment experiences in the 2 different scenarios. Formative, because we want to give them feedback, and summative, because obviously they need to be provided with a grade as well. Okay, now this is taking us to our second step in my presentation this afternoon. We need to assess across the 6 levels of the cognitive skills, okay, in the Bloom's taxonomy. But I want you to pay attention to the following taxonomy. This is not like the traditional taxonomy that we are accustomed to seeing, right? What do I mean? Usually we begin with, let's say, like the base of the pyramid, the biggest layer is the one connected to remembering. And then little by little, that is shrinking as we go through the top until we get to creation. But here the idea is to consider that creating, evaluating, and analyzing are at the same level of performance that we wish we could be attaining with our students in the classroom. It doesn't mean that the application, the comprehension, and the ability to remember are not important. They are. But consider the questions that I have there to the right. In which layer do we provide learners with tasks so they can manipulate a thematic unit's content? Well, that is obviously connected to the application. Consider the second question. In which layer do teachers assess a student's comprehension and recollection of language lexical and syntactical content? In the section for comprehension, of course, that is remembering. And as a consequence, the layer that is connected to trainees producing true, authentic language is the one connected to the last or the top layer that we have in this inverted pyramid: creation, evaluation, and analysis. Now, the next task that you are going to be performing is the following. So let me explain this to you before we send you to your breakout rooms. Look at the following. Here, you are provided with the series of activities. And the idea is you and your partners will be identifying which of these 4 layers now are they related to. Okay, so there will be 7 different activities that I would like you to please work with your partners and obviously come up with an answer. In the end, you might be telling me, it seems to me that that activity might be connected to, let's say, A and B, and that would probably be true. So there's, what I'm trying to say is like, there's no reason why an activity cannot be connected to more than one, let's say, a layer in the pyramid. Okay, people, I need you to take a look at your chats. And right there, you are being provided with the link to the next one. So make sure that you're able to open it before we send you to the breakout rooms. Okay, excellent. Thank you, Diego. Now I know that it got over there. Mark, could
Sure.
you again send people to the breakout rooms?
Happy to do so. So there were a
Thank you.
few people last breakout room that were a little confused about what they had to do. I think as long as one person in each room could open this link and share their screen, and then the instructions are there and you can work your way through it. And if you lost the link, just look in the chat. You'll find it there. Just you might have to scroll up a little bit. And then the other option is the call for help button. Use that if you're stuck and you're not sure what you have to do, and we'll be happy to come in and check on you. Jonathan, about how much time do you think we'll give them?
This one will take like about some 5-6 minutes.
Perfect.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so we're going to open the rooms now.
Okay. I know that some of you were not able to get to the end, but that's fine. The idea here is to come up with the following in our minds. Okay, let me start sharing this thing again. What seems to be the problem, if there is any kind of problem, when we decide that an exercise it's only connected to one single layer? Consider this exercise for a moment. We have a speaking, listening exercise that probably will begin by the teacher playing an audio and then probably asking students to interview one another and find the answers to these things here. What's really happening in this exercise? We're testing students' ability to remember the facts and, of course, understand them. But there is not necessarily a true application, creation, evaluation, or analysis of the information that is being provided to them. Okay? Now, consider this other one as well. Okay, defining with subject, adjective clauses. Okay, yeah, this one's taken from Dr. Fall's, book, The Great Writing. Okay, take a look at the following thing that is happening here. Write a sentence with the subject, adjective clause that defines the underlined word. And the example is Brazil is a large country that covers about half of South America. What is happening over here? Okay, this is compared to the one thing that we were paying attention before, a little bit more sophisticated in terms of, it's not just obviously comprehending the concepts behind this combination or subject adjective clauses, but it's a little bit of applying what the rule is in order to produce another sentence. So the intention for this kind of exercise, I'm not talking about like this exercise per se, but it's just like the fact of having you go and work with your partners is to consider or reconsider the importance of understanding that many students cannot be only exposed, so to say, to only one of the layers, but our exercises in the creation of this variety, okay, can be linked to different layers at the same time. Consider, for example, this one. I think like this was one of the most interesting ones from, this coming from O'Neill's, the book by Cambridge, if I'm not wrong, called Unlock. So if you take a look at this, just by paying attention to the instructions, read the text opposite and circle the statement that gives the most important idea in each of the paragraphs. Well, the students need to understand, they need to analyze and evaluate in order to decide whether A or B is the right answer. So there are more cognitive processes going on at the same time. Not just the fact about, okay, where was the fact about the emancipation of, the Black people in the United States in the text? That is not necessarily much about many of these things here. All right. And the same would happen with the rest of the things. So here you have like the one about writing an essay, write an opinion or process essay by following the following instructions. Okay, what would you say happened over here? Can you type in the chat and tell us what you think was actually happening? I don't know if you were able to get to this point. Yeah, of course, it's a production exercise, but in terms of production, that's connected to creation. That's correct. Yeah, I guess it's like not only creating, but it's also like evaluating information and analyzing how you're going to be putting the things together. And that's why, as you said, there is an application as well over here. What about this other one? I guess like what it says here, it's crucial. When we have these people work with a partner and then recommend a neighborhood in your city that would be suitable for each of the people above and give reasons for your recommendations. Of course, there is understanding of what is being said by each of these individuals. Okay, but it's of course, there is evaluation in between as well. Yeah, you need to evaluate using your prior knowledge what a suitable neighborhood for these individuals would be. And what about here? What do you think about this one? Okay. It's drawing something connected to creation that we're really testing, or are we much more interested in the description of a person's home? Yeah, there is a little bit of remembering because obviously you need to remember where things are around, scattered around like in different places in your house. And there is a little bit of application in terms of descriptions as well. So this is not that in terms of higher order thinking that challenging for the students. And this is the last one. This is taken from Touchstone. Yes, there is application over here of concepts. Anything else? Yeah, evaluation. If there is evaluation, usually there is analysis. Okay, excellent. So I guess you are definitely following me on this. Okay, people. So let's pay attention to the following. Let me get rid of that arrow. Now that we're thinking a little bit about this taxonomy, right? Okay, what's going on here? Assessment. Assessment is a strong tool to assess, and now I'm being redundant, learners formatively and summatively. We can assess vocabulary and grammar. For me, it's an exemplary way to know how much students have grasped to be used in language skills communicatively. They are kind of what I would call simple doing tasks. That is an effective way to assess a student performance with simple rubrics and guidelines. And at the same time, even though we may have complex tasks, it's definitely a first-rate way to assess hands-on activities that include interaction with others communicatively. So this is where we are right now in my presentation. We pay attention to the assessment plan, and we were paying attention to Bloom's taxonomy. And we need to understand that whatever experience we have here needs to be aligned with one or several, if possible, layers in the Bloom's taxonomy. Now, let me go ahead with the third step. We need to assess the core content. There are other things that obviously happen in the course, but definitely we need to concentrate on what really matters for what is being taught. Okay? So let's take a look, at the following. I have here the following questions as well, but I also have a simple exercise for you too. If you were to assess the core content that you need to be teaching next week, for example, what would that be? Can you think of 3, perhaps 4 core contents? You can link everything in your language course. So you know that what you are doing in the class is geared towards the teaching and of course the learning of those core contents. How do course experiences, that is the activities that we have been discussing, assist your learners to develop expected terminal goals? The terminal goal is definitely one of those things that is telling you, teacher, what needs to be taught. And should be the guiding, I would say, force for you to develop these activities or experiences, learning experiences for your students, whether they are going to be formative or summative. And what about the last question? What assessment tools can you use to gather evidence of a student language development? Okay. Before we give an answer to this thing, for sure you're going to be able to. I want you to pay attention to the following. And the following is this. Okay. Let us suppose the next week you are going to be teaching your students how to describe a house. In your map for your plan, you need to spot the necessary vocabulary for students to be able to describe a house. That is, the names of rooms in a house, the objects in those rooms, expressions such as upstairs, downstairs, and maybe a series of adjectives. Okay? This is part of the core content that I need to evaluate, correct? What structures are needed so students can describe a house? What about things such as there is or there are? Perhaps adjectives and noun constructions. There is a big window in my room. There might be use of prepositions as well. Okay? Yes, you need to locate the objects, or you need to teach your students how to locate objects in a room. So take a look at what I'm saying again about the core content. The linguistic skill needed to be taught is this one. And as a consequence, I need to spot vocabulary and the structures that are needed. But once I have these things, okay, what about the course experiences that I'm going to be devising so my students can practice this thing? Yeah, of course, we can have multiple choice exercises, matching words with pictures, exercises with odd one out exercises, such as, okay, from the following list, which word does not belong to an object in a bedroom, for example, a fill in the gap exercise, and so on. But there might also be other things, such as, what about you asking your students to describe their ideal home, or to describe their favorite room in their house? Or if they were going to renovate their houses, what would they do? Again, it will all depend on the complexity of the structures that you are using. And then you need some sort of an assessment tool in order to find out what's going on with your students. In order for you to get some observational data, okay, you might also have something like vocabulary games at the end to verify if they were able to manipulate these words correctly. There might be a little quiz test or something like that where students can actually test, or you can actually test whether they were able to comprehend these structures, the use of prepositions, or these particular constructions as well. And what about something else such as a student word journals in which they are obviously including the information connected to house descriptions? Again, this is just an example of a possibility of you spotting the core content that needs to be taught. And this is what really matters in the end. The student's ability to manipulate this information in order to be able to describe a house. Now, what you're going to be doing, and this is the challenge, is to do pretty much the same thing with some other examples that I'm going to be providing in a moment. Here I have this other one, describing routine activities on weekdays. Describing last weekend activities. Okay. And describing future trends by making predictions. Yeah, so you can see I included 3 different types of exercises depending on the level of complexity. So that's why they are marked with A1, A2, or sorry, B1. Okay, so let me stop again sharing so I can actually share with you the link to the next activity. Let me see what time it is. Okay, so I guess with this one, I can give you a little bit around 8 minutes so you can discuss with your partners. You don't need to fill in the blanks or anything like that, but I want you just to discuss, comment with your partners a little bit about these things. Okay, people, make sure that you're able to open the link. So could you please click on it?
So Jonathan, I'm just going to make a little comment here. So I'm going to make this slightly bigger groups, 7 or 8 people. I think when we were in some of the smaller groups, we were having some issues with certain people having connectivity issues, and there were a couple of people that were kind of on their own. So I think with a group of 7 or 8, there'll be more than a few people who are able to participate in the conversation.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you, Mark.
Okay. You tell me when you're ready to send them.
Yep, we can have them
All right.
work right now. Go ahead. So
Okay.
some 8 minutes, roughly speaking.
Okay. All
Okay,
the rooms are closed now.
excellent. So we're back in the main room. Once again, even if you didn't have a chance to go through all of them, this is giving you an idea of how you can map the language that is going to be needed. Important. This is very important. The book will not always provide, will not always provide you with everything that is needed for this specific kind of, let's say, task of describing a house. Some books may include certain things, others will include the same things and others will simply have a completely different list of let's say, vocabulary and structures needed for that specific thing. But once again, if you notice, one of the important things connected to this section is that every time that we move from this thing to this kind of exercises to these other ones, not only we're controlling the core content that is being taught, but at the same time, we're moving in the Bloom's taxonomy, different layers. So we might begin with something very basic as remembering like rooms in a house by showing students with pictures, okay, to completing some fill in the blanks exercises with there is, there are, until we get into a much more productive exercise where they have to describe an ideal home. And that is now application with obviously a little bit of evaluation as well. You see, this is practically what it's doing. And the idea again was have you go through the process to start thinking of what is needed in every single layer here in order to be able to guarantee that students will be able to describe last weekend activities or future trends by making predictions. So in other words, in order to wrap up this section over here, when we are obviously getting into the activities, having in mind the core content or having in mind this target linguistic skill, this will help me identify those skills that are already aligned with the CEFR and that students need to learn in the classroom. The course experiences or activities, as we mentioned before, they need to be carefully picked out in order to make sure that students are able to assimilate. Yeah, there is a mistake there. An O is missing of the new content. After that, well, we need to keep in mind that there is a target set of vocabulary pieces that need to be learned, as well as part of the grammar that also needs to be taught. And we need to identify the type of assessment tool that we want to use with them. And it could be something, as somebody said before, it could be like a simple rubric that you can say, yes, students are able or not able to do things, or what's missing over there. Because with this, what I would simply call some sort of, let's say, reflective journaling that people can be doing, they would say, okay, while I was doing this, I noticed that I missed something like this because students repetitively ask me about how can I say this and that in English, teacher? So we're pretty much at the end of step number 3, in which, again, my assessment experiences and tools, they need to be aligned to the core content. Any other thing that is being learned by the student is wonderful, but this is not necessarily fully connected to what they have to learn in the course that they are taking with you. All right. And now we're getting into the last part. And the last part is we need to help our students succeed when there is something that we would call the language assessment task. Correct? Okay. Well, let's go ahead here. Well, I have some other questions here that I also want you to discuss. Okay. And the question that you have here, and you're going to be discussing again with your partners for our last breakout room session, is what is needed to help students become successful on language formative assessments in the classroom. What about summative assessment tasks? What's needed in that case? And what else is important, or what else is an ingredient, the important ingredient for language assessment tasks? Okay. So once again, I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to provide you with another and the last link. Second, yes. All right. So please make sure that you can go to the chat and open the following link. Now it's there. Could you please? Okay. Yeah, for this task, I'm going to be asking you to work obviously again with your partners, go to the questions, but on the second slide, you have a much more interesting thing to complete, which is a brain that includes expectations, instructions, opportunities, the modeling of a task, and the feedback. Okay. Mark, this time around, so again, pretty much like about 8 more minutes, and that would be almost time for us to be closing our session. Thank you.
Sounds great. All right, so let's go ahead now.
Okay. This is where you were at, and I want to jump from this slide to the next one. And in this one, I have the same exact areas in terms of expectations, instructions, modeling, and so on. And this is what I want you to consider with me. In terms of expectations, we need to make them quite explicit to the students. What do we want them to do? What do we expect them to do? And how we expect them to do it is obviously connected to the preparation. And this preparation has to include detailed instructions. Okay, it doesn't mean that you're going to be, what should I call this? Making lengthy explanations of things that should be done, but for sure, some kind of concept checking is necessary here. So you would simply say, okay, Mark, in your own words, what do you have to do? And that will lead me then to the modeling in case there are still some students who are not clear on the things that they're supposed to be doing. So if I can offer them an example or something like that, the students will be able to understand what they're expected to be doing in an exercise. And you might be telling someone, okay, Lee, you're going to be a student A and I'm going to be a student B, and we're going to model this for the class. And once this has been done, I'm sure that students will be able to continue doing probably something like that. That also makes me wonder about the provision of opportunities that we need to provide our students. That is, an exercise might be a one chance to know whether students are or not understanding something. But if they are not, then these ample opportunities to master content need to be provided. If they fail the first time, a second time will be needed. And why not a third time? Finally, the feedback, it's necessary. You need to lay down meaningful feedback that can lead to improvement. And if such a thing is not provided to them timely, what is going to be happening? The students will simply think that what they did was okay. And the detail, again, feedback is necessary. So you can have a little bit of, as a student, you can have a little bit of reflection on the things that the teacher is telling you that you have or you have not done correctly. Well, I have some final thoughts about this assessment of core content, where again, we need to go back to the expectations. The learners need to know what is expected of them to comply with those things. The instructions need to be carefully provided along with, as I said before, concept checking to verify understanding. Okay, what do you have to do in this? Modeling is necessary. So you can carry out or show them a sample performance of what needs to be done so they can replicate the same thing. Once again, this thing that I mentioned about the opportunities. Students need to be given different chances to try out new content. Not necessarily in the same way, but with different types of exercises. Words such as wonderful, well done, or great are just void expressions that don't indicate areas where people can improve. You need to tell them, look, it seems to me that you're having trouble with the third person. You see, every time that you're explaining, for example, your mother's routine during the week, you always say, she have, she eat, and that kind of thing. So wonderful, well done, and great are not exactly like good ways to say anything in terms of feedback. So here, once again, this has been a little bit of the progression of the presentation today. And here we are in number 4. Assessment experiences are modeled with the provision of meaningful feedback. So students can really know whether they are or they are in need of extra exercises for them to really master something. Before I give you the chance so you can ask some questions, I want you to think a little bit about this. Did you know that assessment is not an end in itself, but a vehicle for educational improvement? Did you know that learning is a complex process and it entails not only what students know, but what they can do with what they know? Did you know that assessment is a goal-oriented process? It entails comparing educational performance with educational purposes and the expectations. Did you know that formative assessment can help us understand which students learn best under what conditions? Did you know that improvement is best fostered when assessment entails a linked series of activities undertaken over time and not only one time? And did you know that assessment is geared toward intended goals in a spirit of continuous improvement? Yeah, this was taken from the 9 principles of good practices for assessing student learning. And my closing statement here is coming from the American Psychological Association. I guess all of us are much aware of APA, right? But what they say here is very true. The students will fare best in assessment activities when faculty make expectations explicit, when they provide detailed instructions and offer samples or models of successful performance. They will benefit most with opportunities to practice prior to assessment and when given detailed feedback about the quality of their performance. Yeah, with this, that would be my closing statement over here. And I would like to know if what your takeaways are, or if you have any other questions in regards to my presentation today.
Okay, so we're getting into the thank you very much part. Why don't we go ahead and actually make that official before we continue with the Q&A. So Jonathan, thank you so much for your awesome presentation. Very insightful and very visually appealing. And I know a lot of people are going to want to come back to your presentation and read it on their own. So let's give him a virtual round of applause or do something so he can see you in the cameras there. That was great. So thank you so much for that, Jonathan.
You're welcome.
And so I know that there must be some questions or some comments, and we would love to hear from you. So don't go away just yet. All right, so I am seeing a few things coming through in the chat. All right, so Jonathan, there was a question from Gao. I don't know if we're going to get arrested by the police or what. It says, what about assessment with games? Is that worth trying?
Remember what I said before, variety is something that is needed. And if students can be, once again, assessed while they are playing, especially when we're talking about children, why not? You will get to know if they're able to use the structures, or I should say like the content that needs to be taught and learned by them, go for gamification. Professor Healy will talk about that during the conference next week. So we need to pay attention to her presentation next week.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Again, so questions could also be a comment. Again, we would love to hear some teacher voices here. So if you just indicate in the chat that you would like to say something, we can let you open your mics. Someone was asking. Go ahead, Jonathan.
No, what I was going to say, I just want to make a quick final remark. And that is, it doesn't matter which group or age group you're talking, you're teaching. I can see here, like, roughly speaking, it's like almost 25% of the people here are either teaching in pre-K, in high school, at the university level, and some other people working just with adult learners. And that's great. So it doesn't matter where you actually teach. The steps fit into any of these specific groups. It doesn't matter how long you've been teaching, whether you have been teaching for 1 to 5 years, and I can see that I have 5 people who have been teaching for more than 36 years. That's incredible. But at the same time, remember, it doesn't matter whether you are a certified or a non-certified online instructor. All these pieces of advice coming from the literature connected to assessment can help you become better at helping students become good at what they're supposed to be learning, and especially when you are going to be assessing them. So again, I want to thank you for your participation. I want to invite you again, I know that Mark will mention that again, to the NCT that is coming as of Thursday, next week. And everybody is invited to register as many sessions as possible.
Thanks, Jonathan. We have a couple of people that would like to say something. I know Barry wants to say
Sure,
something,
go ahead.
and
No problem
Carolina Verde also had her hand up. So I think we'll hear from Carolina first, and then Barry will go to you. So Carolina, if you could unmute, that would be great. Maybe the hand was just to applaud. Carolina, are you there?
Okay. Sorry. I only want to know if, yeah? Can you hear me?
Yes,
we
yes.
can listen to you. Sure, perfectly.
Okay. So that my question is that a student must be necessarily know that they are going to be assessed.
That's an interesting question. And I think like, once again, as long as students are prepared for quote unquote, the unexpected, why shouldn't that be in that way? I guess this is also important that to give them like 1, 2, 3 different, let's say, types of exercises where you can grade them. Because again, for whatever reason, if you have chosen someone and that someone is not prepared for that day, for whatever reason, that might be a little bit unfair.
Mhm.
So again, it has its pros and cons, but I wouldn't say that it's something that should not be happening in that way. I don't know what you think, Carolina.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
So Barry, go ahead.
Hi there. Thank you for sharing the information that you have offered at us in this PD talk. So I want to just make a comment about the breakout room that we just got with the people or the participants. I want to reflect a little bit about the slide that was about doing great in assessment tasks. And we reflected a little bit about how do we as English teachers should be doing like really clear instructions when we prepare activities, because we're talking about not just the fact that we are teaching in this in our classroom. We are teaching right now in our online classrooms in different by using different tools and activities, and sometimes the students get lost because of the instructions that are not very detailed, right? And also with the opportunities of practice that we have to try to apply variation of activities so that students cannot get bored in our classroom. So this is a challenge right now because we are in this pandemic situation and we have to try to make different stuff, different activities, so the students can get this motivation of learning a little bit. So thank you so much for the information, and I hope to see you soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Barry.
All right. Another comment, not exactly related to this, but you know more about this than I do, Jonathan. Carlos asking, you know where to get any good online learning certifications? Any recommendations?
My goodness. As far as I remember, like Coursera and Future Learn have like
Yeah,
good
they have
spaces for
tons of.
learning.
Uh-huh.
Yes. Those are like the two that come into my mind right on the spot. There might be others, of course.
Okay. Dr. Haler saying that TESOL also offers a certificate in online teaching.
Okay, you see, coming from the experts.
Vladislava, excuse my pronunciation, had a question. Can we use breakout rooms for young learners or better not?
I guess we need to give it a try, first of all, and see what actually happens. So there's no reason why they cannot be used unless something unexpected is actually happening over there. But that's something that needs to be first tried out and then, you know, evaluated and analyzed to see if it is viable to continue working in breakout rooms with children. Okay.
Okay. Any suggestions to teach primary school virtually? Any tips for MEP? And that's kind of a hard question because we really need to know your context there, Lucia. But I don't know if you have any comments on that, Jonathan.
And what is the question again?
It's any suggestions to teach primary school virtually? Any tips for MEP?
Well, I definitely think now I'm just like trying to figure things out in terms of the national program for, you know, like English. And I still think that many of the things that we have shared today fit perfectly into those programs. I mean, there needs to be a plan. We need to identify the core that needs to be taught, and we need to guarantee that the assessment it's okay. And what should I say? Viable on the one hand, practical and fair for the students. So I think like there might be like different things that could be done for sure. But again, not being a MEP teacher, obviously it's not going to help me say much about this. So, but a little bit of trial and error, it's a little bit necessary here, I guess.
Well, I'm going to do this. I'm going to go ahead and make a couple final announcements, and that way, if you want to disconnect, you could go ahead and do that. And if you want to stay and out for a couple minutes, I'm sure Jonathan won't mind continuing to discuss. So we just want to say thanks again for attending. Remember, next week we have our national conference. Starting on Thursday, you're going to be able to see up to 36 hours of training. So 24 PD talks in 4 days. So you'll have a chance to get plenty of ideas for your classes. Of course, my mouse stopped working just as soon as I wanted to share this stuff with you. So I'm on my trackpad here, but also want to just remind you to join our community of practice in this site. That's where you're going to be able to, go to the PD Talk section, and you'll be able to find Jonathan's video recording as of Monday. It'll take me a moment to upload that. And if you want his really beautiful and really well organized presentation materials, click here where it says presentation materials, and you'll have access to them for your own personal reference. And we also have a forum that Jonathan created for you to allow you to keep discussing some of these ideas regarding assessment, okay? And so thank you guys so much. And remember, June 18th, we have our next PD talk with Linda Wesley, and it's also on assessment, specifically using games and warm-up activities for formative assessment purposes. So you won't want to miss that. All right, so why don't we kind of call it a day, and anyone who wants to stay and keep discussing can stay for another couple of minutes. All right, thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Vladislava, I totally agree. The word assessment is scary, right? Evaluation is even scarier. But it's a very necessary part of the process, and kind of getting our students to feel comfortable with being assessed and seeing the benefit of their learning process is part of our job. What other word can, I don't know if you saw that question, Jonathan. She's asking, what other word might you suggest that you could use instead of the word assessment, since that tends to scare students?
Evaluation is scarier.
Scarier, yes, I agree.
Yes, so I don't know.
Maybe learning check or something like that.
Exactly. Let me see.
Okay. Okay, everyone. Well, I guess that's enough for today. So we'll see you next time.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you, Mark.
You're welcome.
Jonathan, I'm so sorry. I was checking out. I was finishing my survey. Jonathan, thank you. It was very important. Your topic for today, as always. And Mark, I would want to thank you a lot.
Sure.
To be supporting us always with techniques. Thank you.
No problem, Elena. Nice to have you back.
You're welcome.
Jonathan, excellent framework. Very good.
Thank you, Rafa.
I would like to say thank you, Jonathan and Mark. As for me as a student, it was really meaningful, engaging, and great. All this presentation, I have learned a lot from it. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I want
Thank
to
you for
say
attending our
thank
session.
you,
Yes.
Jonathan, for this presentation. Was great and very helpful, because this quarter we have to apply this in one course. So we have to figure it out how to do it. And thank you, because you give us a lot of information and a lot of ideas.
Okay. Great to know that it's going to be helpful and handy.